Television loves to subvert expectations and to throw tons of curveballs. Without the classic cliffhanger ending and assorted varieties of finales, where would the viewership be? Things have changed since streaming became additionally popular, but even with unlimited access to your favorite shows, folks are still trying out different ways to keep people engaged. When it comes to horror TV, there's no denying the appeal of a wicked kill, especially after developing a character for some time. So let's go over some of the most gut-wrenching, stomach-turning bits across some popular shows. It's time for the top 5 worst horror TV show deaths. Coming in at number 5, we've got Glenn from The Walking Dead. Remember when The Walking Dead was unofficially the premier TV show? Man, times really have changed, eh? There was a lull for a bit, and then with some of the more recent seasons, they managed to drum up interest again with some insane new changes, which, good for them. Plus, there's the spin-off Fear the Walking Dead, and if that's not enough, you can always revisit the comics. During the first run of must-watch TV, though, The Walking Dead established a whole bunch of fan-favorite characters. These folks were pretty much bulletproof, as they could get shot, stabbed, dropped from heights, or kicked in the crotch and still find their way back into the story. Anyone else, though, that's fair game. A lot of early deaths in the series had pretty big impacts, especially when they were characters that stuck around for a while. Worse was when the showrunners managed to sneak it in, letting a lone walker cause some unexpected chaos, or a crazy betrayal that made no sense at the time. Hell, some off-screen deaths even had some pretty enormous impacts. But there was one character who nobody wanted to see die, and then still did. Our dear, sweet Glenn. Audiences essentially saw this guy grow up right in front of their very eyes. Starting out as a nervous young dude, folks saw him learn the ins and outs of surviving an apocalypse, become a decisive decision maker, develop all sorts of weapon expertise, and even fall in love. To have a character like that be killed off would just be awful. His death was teased a few times, with a more memorable instance being the infamous dumpster dive, but lo and behold, he survived through thick and thin. This drew a lot of controversy at the time, and it makes sense. Folks had been using the comics as a roadmap for a while and knew about his inevitable fate at the hands of a baseball bat brutality. But with the fake out, followed by a different fake out where somebody that wasn't Glenn got their brains bashed in by barbed wire, it seemed like something else could happen. But in the end, it didn't. The fan favorite ex-delivery driver went down hard, and the show wouldn't be the same for a very long time. Yowza. Coming in at number 4, we've got Chie from Ju-on Origins. There's a lot of wild and disturbing stuff that happens over the course of this show. Like, of course there is. It's a Ju-on spin-off. The Grudge doesn't pull punches. But even among a plethora of insane events, like a landlord's son kidnapping and torturing a tenant in their home, a trio of high schoolers holding down a classmate, and more, there's one that stands out above the rest. We meet the Masakis, Keiichi and Chie, who are about to have a baby. However, the husband has been lied to the whole time and is made aware of this at the worst possible time. While eating dinner, his wife serves him a large portion of wine, which she is drugged. As it starts taking its effect, she lets him in on her secret. She's been cheating on him with another man, and the baby is not her husband's. The adulterers had been planning on killing their respective spouses for a while now so they could finally be together. Why she just had to tell her husband this before he was literally on death's door, I mean, I might never know. But this revelation proves to make the husband extremely angry and aggressive and not willing to go down without a fight. Keiichi manages to overpower Chie and kill her, but that's not all he's gonna do. The Grudge takes over, asking for a sacrifice, and what better sacrifice than an unborn child, right? He carves into his dead wife and removes the child, apparently totally over it now that he knows it's not his. So out comes baby, and then he brings it to the house where it all began to bury it in the backyard. After that's done, he heads back home and discovers a telephone inside of Chie where the baby once was. In a moment of lucidity, he turns himself into the police, but before he can get there, the ghosts of his dead wife and child come for him. Brutal. Coming in at number 3, we've got Kaylee from Slasher. This one has a bit of a double whammy behind it, and I'll get to explaining that in a little bit, but for now, we'll take a look at what makes this death so gruesome to begin with. Slasher, the Canadian killer show. Rare, I know. Every season introduces a bunch of characters that you'll come to dislike for one reason or another, and then you'll get to watch as they're methodically and creatively killed off. It's a fun formula, especially when you try to figure out who's behind all the madness. The death of Kaylee, however, confused a lot of people. Usually the folks who die in this show really deserve it. The more terrible they are, the more horrific their death is. And usually some really crazy ones are saved for later. But Kaylee, a teacher who really didn't get up in anybody's business, ends up dissected like a frog. We see it happen in pretty graphic detail too, with Kaylee being sliced open with a scalpel and then having her ribs cracked with shears. Imagine seeing that on TV 20 years ago. This all happens pretty early in the season too. So what's the deal? Against all the other awful individuals in season 3 of Slasher, what made Kaylee special? Well, it could be that as an authority figure, she didn't do enough to regulate the bad behaviors of all the other little maniacs. Plus, in a Canadian show, Erin Karpluk was a pretty big name and a lot of folks liked her, so killing her off early was almost like a Drew Barrymore Scream move. Interesting. Coming in at number 2, we've got John Franklin from The Terror. Season 1 of The Terror is quite the impressive piece of horror television. It tells the tale of a ship stuck in Arctic ice and a horrifying monster that stalks the crew as they try to survive. In the first few episodes, it sets up some main characters who you would think would at least make it most of the way through the season. However, subversion of expectations tends to get a good shock out of people, especially when you do it with some leg-tearing flair. Captain Sir John Franklin, commanding officer of the HMS Erebus, had to make some hard decisions to keep his crew alive. Unfortunately, his bold predictions don't work out, which is what originally causes the ship to become frozen in the ice. From there, more bad stuff happens, but it seems as though John Franklin is going to be cemented as a major player throughout. Upon learning about a massive, deadly creature stalking the frozen wasteland, Franklin and some other Marines head out to hunt it down in order to prevent further casualties. It was ready though, and it ambushes them, killing a Marine and Franklin. His death is not an easy one either. He's torn in two and then tossed down a deep ice well to drown. When his crewmates go to investigate, all they find is one of his legs in a puddle of blood. Ouch. And finally at number 1, we've got the Gimp from American Horror Story. Cults do a lot of crazy stuff, eh? You know, sacrificing folks to whatever power they believe in, enforcing strict enough and hard to understand rules, wearing funky clothes. Oh, and also stabbing people in the chest while they're suspended from the ceiling with fish hooks through their skin. Yeah, that too. I could have given this honor to a whole bunch of kills from the series. Hell, there are a few in this season and even this episode that could take the lead. Shoutouts nail guns to the dome over and over. But man, this is one gnarly, gruesome kill straight out of a Takeshi Miike flick. It's not often that you get to see this kind of stuff on network TV, but here we are. This poor guy didn't even see it coming. Bob, a news dude with a penchant for compromising stories about clown murder, is chosen as the latest target by the cult, but they come across his pal hanging from the rafters in the attic. No witnesses, right? Well, there you have it. 5 freaky and up deaths from the world of horror television. I'm sure there's plenty more where that came from, particularly in the future. So, what'd you think of the list? Do you agree with my picks? What is the worst horror TV death of all time? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more lethargic ones from the top 5 horror movies inspired by Ed and Lorraine Warren. Rachel Ward says, "The Haunted scared the bacon bits out of me when I was a kid. It's still one of my favorite based on a true story paranormal movies." Hell yeah, glad we could bring that back to light for all to see. Jennifer Dimer says, "Thanks Keegan, you're the best with all things horror." I do what I can, thanks for sticking around. Ace Hole says, "Man, I just rewatched The Conjuring 2 the other day. The old man demon interview still freaks me out." Rewatching in anticipation of the trailer for number 3. Marley Grazer says, "I love learning about this stuff." It's always good to read a little deeper, right? And Prep For It says, "I agree with your 5, Keegan. The Warrens were real investigators, but even they had to exaggerate and embellish some stories after they became famous. The investigations and book writing were all they did, and I would not expect them to do it for free." Anything to do with the paranormal is gonna get sensationalized, especially when Hollywood's involved. And that's all the time we have for today. I'm going to eat a cactus in the desert, spikes and all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. But with unlimited access, nope. Wow, what is happening with this script? The baseball bat brutality. Ugh. Glenn getting their brain bashed. But there's a lot of wild and disturbing stuff that happens over the excuse me.